This happened to me about 2 years ago, while our family was still living in our old house in the north. The weather in the north is never constant, but always extreme. One day, the sun is blazing hot and the grass is green. The next day, it's bucketing rain and the streets and lawns are muddy. And a week later, it could be snowing. In other words, it is hard to plan for any outdoor activities in advance. Which is why I had taken up a hobby which was completely indoors. In our old house, we had a relatively normal basement, a cracked tile floor, wood-paneled walls, pillars standing here and there for support, storage boxes, and old paint cans that had dried up years ago. But on the far side of the basement was a tiny room, no larger than a bathroom or a walk-in closet. That was what we called the workshop. In the workshop, I would spend my time doing my hobbies. I had many interests, and I won't bother to list them here, but suffice to say that I spent a great deal of time in that room. However, I never felt completely at ease in that room. Above the countertop where I did most of my work, there was a tiny window that was just above ground level. It looked out through a cluster of long grass out into the nearby street. But since I did most of my projects in the workshop at night, there was hardly anyone out on the streets, and when someone would chance to walk by along the sidewalk, the light from my workshop window would draw their attention, and we would almost always make eye contact. Needless to say, this was always unnerving to me since the workshop is so secluded from the rest of the house. But for the longest time, I did my best to ignore it, offering my friendliest smile to anyone who happened to glance down at my window. And for the most part, people were fairly nice, waving or smiling to me as they hurried on their way, many of them surprised to actually see someone through the window and embarrassed to be caught peeping in. But one night, things were different. I had been working here in the workshop. It was probably around 2 o'clock in the morning. It was always a particularly dark time of night, and if it weren't for the street lamp above the sidewalk, I would not have been able to see out into the street through my window. But even the dull yellow street lamp was barely bright enough to cast a glowing orb above one tiny section of sidewalk. But it was in that faintly lit section that a figure, moving at a very slow pace, eventually stopped, fascinated by the light from my window. I felt uneasy as they stared into my workshop, and I could not tell if they were aware of my presence. But what really started to freak me out was when the person started walking across the lawn toward my window. I had a lot of tools on my countertop and found one that could do a considerable amount of damage. At this point, there could be no doubt that they had seen me. The light from the workshop was glaringly bright, and the figure was less than 5 feet away, crouching over to look through the window. And a few moments later, they were knelt down inches from it, looking in. I could see their face clearly now. It was a young man, probably his early 30s. He looked at me in the eye through the window, and then he pointed at me, mouthing a few words at me, though I could not understand. I gripped the sharp hobby tool in my hand with white knuckles, but I could not move. I wanted to shout for help or run away, but I could not. And it's a good thing I couldn't. The young man reached into his pocket and revealed a small leather notebook and pen. Taking a few seconds to scrawl a message into the top page, he tore it off and slapped it against the window. In shaky, scratched words, the message read, "Don't turn around." And as I read it, I heard the workshop door slam against the wall with full force and footsteps echoed up the staircase. I heard my front door fly open and then slam shut with a desperation. The man outside my window had saved my life. He had seen an intruder standing behind me in the doorway of my workshop, and he was holding one of my kitchen knives. Less than a week later, I moved out of that house and out of the north.